Welcome to the Dance Centre podcast. I am your host, Claire French, and I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'll be talking to dancers, choreographers and other members of the dance world here on the West Coast to find out more about their creative work and practices and to discuss what it means to us to be dance professionals today. Thanks for joining us. Jessica Jone was born in Vancouver and received her early dance training from her mother, Lorita Leung. She later went on to train professionally in Chinese classical and folk dance at the Beijing Dance Academy and the Guangdong Dance School in China. She is also a graduate of the Contemporary Dance Program at Simon Fraser University. Jessica is an accomplished dancer and seasoned performer who has won many awards for her performance and choreography, including the Chairman's Award at the 4th Peach and Plum Dance Competition in Beijing and 2 Best Choreography Awards at the North American Chinese Dance Competition. She and husband Cheng Ching Wai co-founded the cross-cultural contemporary dance company Moving Dragon, which performed across Canada at prominent festivals including the Cannes Asian Dance Festival and the National Arts Centre of Canada. Jessica is currently principal and artistic director of the Lorita Leung Dance Academy. She is also Canada's first senior instructor of the Beijing Dance Academy Chinese Dance Graded Examination Syllabus. As a Chinese dance educator, she has conducted workshops and masterclasses at various dance organizations, including Simon Fraser University, the Dancers Transition Resource Centre, the Canadian Dance Teachers Association, Go Ballet Academy, the Dance Centre, the American Chinese Arts Society in Boston, and St. Paul's School in New Hampshire. She has also worked with elementary and secondary teachers in the Vancouver and Richmond school districts to promote Chinese dance education in public schools. Jessica has been recognized by the City of Vancouver as one of its remarkable women in the field of arts and culture. I'm delighted to be joined by Jessica today. We've talked about so many things. We haven't been able to include all of it in the podcast, and so I look forward to being able to speak with her again about some of her rich history and experiences. But we're talking mainly here today about Chinese dance, her history with Chinese dance. So welcome, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us. So we have so much, I think, to talk about. Your relationship to the Dance Centre goes back a very long way.
It does.
Yes. So we will talk about all of that. So I would love to know, and I would love for the listeners to know just a little bit of context around your relationship to both the Lorita Leung Dance Academy and all that you have grown this into, and a little bit of your contemporary dance background.
Mm-hmm.
But really for an understanding of kind of where you are today, what you are working on today, how you are leading the Chinese dance company and traditions and things in the Vancouver area at the moment, and just where that sits with you.
Okay.
And then we'll go in and out of that journey.
Okay. So let's start right at the beginning. So I was pretty much born into dance, you could say, because my mother is Lorita, and she was a dancer in China before immigrating to Vancouver in 1970. So at that time in the 70s and into the early 80s, she started by teaching Chinese dance lessons in the basement of her home. And my earliest memories were when I was maybe 2.5 or 3, going downstairs and just sitting in the corner of the little basement studio that we had and just watching her. And so it's always been an important part of my life. And so she really was my first teacher. And I studied Chinese dance with her recreationally. We would have class, maybe twice a week. At that time, as her student base grew, she would also rent the Kerrisdale Community Center. And so I remember every Sunday we would be there the whole time, and I would have my lessons and go out and play on my own. And that was just a very important part of my childhood, and taking part in performances. And looking back on that, it was a very special time. And so my professional studies in Chinese dance began when I was about 14, and I had the opportunity to go to the Beijing Dance Academy to study over the summer. And at that time, there really weren't many opportunities for overseas students to enroll at the dance academy because it wasn't open really to outsiders. But I was lucky enough to have special arrangements made. And that was a really, really eye-opening experience because it was my first time on my own in China. I had, of course, been previously because with my mom's dance group, at that time we were called the Lorita Leung Dancers. We had toured China a few times in the 80s. And so I did have an impression of China and what that was like, but it was always, you know, with the support of my mother and the other dancers, we would go as a group. So when I was 14, that really was the first time I went on my own. And so I was there for about 6 weeks and just had the really, really invaluable opportunity of learning one-on-one with some of the really, really fundamentally pioneering teachers at that time, because the teachers that I had a chance to study with really were some of the key teachers of the Beijing Dance Academy, because the Beijing Dance Academy was formed in 1954. So when I was there, a lot of the pioneering teachers were still actively teaching, and I was so lucky. Although I didn't realize at the time because, you know, when I was 14, I didn't know the whole context of Chinese dance. But I was very, very fortunate to have one-on-one training with several of those teachers. And that started a habit of me going back every summer through high school. And I would go back, because, you know, of course, September to June, I was in Vancouver doing my studies. I continued dancing with my mom. And then every summer I would go, and it would consume my whole summer, but it was something that I was really looking forward to.
So can I ask you did you board there? Yes. Who did you stay with? How was that? Were you with other students as well? And did you form strong connections?
I was with, they had so the campus of Beijing Dance Academy, there's of course many apartments, because all of the teachers also live there. The students board in the academy and the teachers also live on campus. There was a floor in one of the apartments where all the foreign students would stay. And at that time, there weren't any from North America. So I was one of the first from North America, but there were students from nearby Asian countries who were there. So I did meet some good friends from Japan and some from Hong Kong and Taiwan, Malaysia, Singapore. And that was a really fun experience because, you know, at 14, it's a newfound freedom as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're not dancing 24 hours a day. So I had a blast. I really did. So the thing though, is because I was going in the summer, a lot of the students would be leaving to go back to their home during the summer. So I went during break, and I would catch the last few weeks of class because classes there ran until about the third week of July. So I did have the opportunity to take technique classes with some of the ongoing regular students. And then once they went home, I would continue for a few more weeks on my own.
On your own? Oh, yes. Oh,
so that was quite... That was
intense.
Quite an experience. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, being in this social environment and then everybody disappears and you have this, it's a privilege to have it, but it's also an isolating experience, isn't it? All that way, you know, like you're all eyes are on you. You know, it's like
it was, and I, you know, had a chance to work on my Chinese, obviously, because when I went, I wasn't fluent at all. I mean, I could speak a little bit, but hardly enough to, you know, function normally. So that was a crash course, and that was an immersion. So I have a lot of interesting experiences and funny stories now when I look back, but it's, I just feel so thankful that it was a time when my parents felt comfortable sending me across the world. And, you know, now that I'm a mother and I look at the world today, it's not necessarily the case anymore that we're going to ship our students off to, you know, a foreign country when they're 14, and it's very different.
I mean, the camp situation and all of those things is one thing. Then to be away for that length of time and for all those people to go and you to have this, it's wonderful, isn't it? It really is like a time capture, like a time capsule capture that you were really able to take advantage of. And that's led to your dedication and devotion to the art form, but also to offering these opportunities for other people to come and learn from you and learn within the community that you're building. And so from all of that very intense and kind of immersive, as you say, experience within particular styles, which I hope, I'd love to give you the opportunity to talk about the different styles of Chinese dance too, because I think you have written about that so eloquently, and it's extremely informative for our listeners. But then there's also the contemporary dance background. And I met you however long ago, I think it might have been 25 years ago, to be honest, if not longer, when you were in the contemporary dance world as well, and fusing, but I would say, definitely inside the contemporary dance world in terms of how you and I interacted.
Yes.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, how that came about, and maybe whether you're still in that world or not, or
So continuing, it follows the arc of my dance story. And so, summers I would spend in Beijing. And then after I graduated high school, I enrolled at Simon Fraser. And then I majored in English, but I did an extended minor in contemporary dance. And so that was how I set foot in the contemporary dance world. And
was that your introduction to contemporary dance then?
It was. I had taken, in my teens, I had taken ballet classes here and there. I did take classes with Earl Kroll when he was teaching at the dance center. Sorry, not the dance center. They used dance gallery. They used to have a studio called the Dance Gallery.
Oh, great.
And I remember busing down there and taking classes, and sometimes it would be Earl, and sometimes it would be Diane Miller.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So I did take some ballet, but it wasn't for a very long time.
Yeah.
I did continue to focus mainly on Chinese dance. But when I got to SFU, that was really the first time I started studying contemporary dance, and I fell in love with it. And so I did my first year at SFU, and then I took a gap year, and I went back to Beijing, and I studied this time. Because it was during the school year, I was able to study at the university level in the Department of Folk Dance at Beijing.
Okay. Oh.
And that was the year that I met Chengxin. So it's all Chengxin, who of course is my husband and partner in dance. And so that's kind of how that started. But after that 1 year, I came back and I completed my degree at SFU. And then, of course, my relationship with the dance center, that started because I was working as the studio rental manager at the dance center during the shift to the new building. So I think that would have been 2000?
2001, 2001, yeah.
Yes.
2000, yeah.
So, sorry,
yeah,
I'm
so
going
you were
back
the studio
and forth
rental
now.
manager. No, that's good. I think that's really useful, actually, because it's never linear. It's always linear when we go back in time and say what dates, but these experiences and the chance,
that's right, everything overlaps.
The fact that you chose that gap year to go back to Beijing and met Chengxin.
I met Chengxin there. I came back, I finished my degree at SFU, and then at that time Chengxin was graduating from Beijing Dance Academy because he was at the Beijing Dance Academy for 11 years, so he did 7 years of the high school, elementary to high school, and then he did 4 years of the university program. So we met during the university years. Yeah. And when I finished SFU, he had already graduated from Beijing Dance Academy and was working at a company in Guangzhou. And so I took another gap year. Well, it wasn't a gap year anymore because I was finished school, but I went back to Guangzhou and I studied at the academy there. I was lucky, though, at the time because one of the very important figures in classical dance, and Madame Li Zhenyi, she's one of the founders of Beijing Dance Academy. She had established a special class at the Guangdong Academy that focused on classical Chinese dance. So I was able to go and study with that class for a year. from 99 until 2000. And then in 2000, Chengchen and I came back together to Vancouver.
So when you say that you had the opportunity, I don't mean to put you on the spot fully, because it's always a little bit embarrassing to mention these things. But is it because you're really good?
Oh.
Are you would you say, you are like a technically proficient, like excellent dancer?
Well,
is that fair to say?
I think that it is, that is fair to say, but I'm also privileged to have access through connections and through knowing various teachers and because it's not, at that time, things are of course changing nowadays, right? And it's much easier to have access to schools in China, but at that time it still wasn't very open. So of course I had to be proficient enough to be able to catch up, because if I'm not going to be able to keep up in class, then there's no way.
You're not going to be
but
there.
I was definitely privileged to have access to these opportunities.
And that's through the summer schools and through your mother and through
Yes.
a whole bunch of connections that you'd made with already a lifetime in dance, as you
Yes,
said, right?
that's
Already.
right.
And before you.
Yes.
It's
the network, right?
Kind of gone into the network. Absolutely. And respecting the network, acknowledging the network and respecting the network and turning up ready.
Yes.
I think that's partly what I want to mention. There's one thing to have the opportunity, and there's another thing to turn up prepared for the opportunity.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think, which is still to this day is something that I think that's really important, to respect that opportunity and in a sense that privilege. So there, the year, what made you come back to Vancouver and bring Chengchen with you? Did you do that? Or did he follow you?
I did.
Did you?
I
did you put him in your suitcase?
Vancouver is really, in my eyes, the best place to be. And, we like to look back at the different chapters, right? Because the story has been very long. We have the Beijing chapter, we have the Guangdong chapter, we have the Vancouver chapter, we have the chapter that we had in Ohio when he was teaching at the university there. So, but ultimately all roads lead back to Vancouver.
And so in Vancouver, and coming back, and maybe we could talk a little bit about Ohio too, because as a family, I believe you moved there for that experience.
That's right.
So then back in Vancouver, I feel like, and in Richmond, right, I feel like you've really built, the world has expanded. Like you have an academy, you have the syllabus, you've fortified connections, if you like, or kind of strengthened connections with Beijing, I believe, in terms of the academy and the syllabus that you now provide, and all of the levels. You have the company, you have the school. I love how this is the vision of that with your discussion about the Beijing Dance Academy. I can see now the correlation between having a home for dance to be integrated into an educational life that I wish and hope was even more prevalent in the Western cultures. To a degree. It feels extremely exclusive to have that. And I wonder if you could talk maybe a little bit about how that came about. Maybe with your mother it came about as well, like this. And you I say inheriting the school and the studio and everything, but really it was passed on to you, and the lineage was passed on, and there's a crossover with you and your mother, and all of those things are happening. So I wonder if we could go there, and then maybe we can talk about Ohio and your dance life with Chengchen, professional dance life a little bit after that. But I'd love to, I feel correlations between what you're growing and what has evolved in Richmond and Vancouver with the Beijing Dance Academy. So could you talk about that development?
Yes. So the Beijing Dance Academy syllabus is basically the brainchild of another pioneer in the classical Chinese dance world, Madame Sun Guangyan. And she really wanted to create a teaching method that made the training that is done at the Beijing Dance Academy on a professional level accessible to non-professional students. And it was really, her whole life's work was how to bring the methodology and the key principles of training into a syllabus that can be accessed by serious recreational, but still recreational students. for China. At that time, she really, I mean, she didn't go into it with the thought that it would become something that is, taught worldwide. But that was her goal. And she started working on it in the late 80s and early 90s. And so we knew her personally. My mom knew her personally just from being in the dance community. And so when she had basically began this program, and it was in the initial stages where they had already started creating the material, she had mentioned it to my mom that this is what she was working on. And they began a discussion of, how this would be really great for overseas students to have access to as well. Because, being part of the diaspora, we really crave any way to maintain a tie with, the source. And of course, Beijing Dance Academy being the center of dance in China. I mean, that was just an incredible thought that we would also here in Canada have access to the same type of training that they're offering Chinese dance students in China. So through that connection, we were able to, starting in 1993, we signed the contract, the partnership that Lorita Leung Dance Association has with Beijing Dance Academy to organize and teach the syllabus here in Canada. And that has grown slowly but steadily since the 90s to now. So it's been for over 30 years now, and the syllabus has gone through many, many evolutions. I was lucky to have a personal relationship with Madame Sun. I mean, I remember in the summer, I would go to her house and she would feed me, and we would, it was just, it's incredible to look back at that now. Yeah. But anyway, she created this syllabus, and over the past 30 years, it's gone from a small syllabus, not a small syllabus, it was a big undertaking and a very significant, syllabus, but it has developed from being seven levels to 13 levels. And it basically, we start when the children are 5, so they're in kindergarten, they start grade 1, and they go all the way up through to first year university. And the Lorita Leung Dance Association also was able to have the syllabus recognized by the BC Ministry of Education. So now students in BC who successfully complete the syllabus levels 7, 8, and 9 are able to receive 4 credits per grade towards their high school graduation. Oh, it's basically I think it's called ADST, Applied Design Skills and Technology credits that they have in high school now.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, all the things you have to keep up on.
I know, right? Things are changing. And I really am feeling very optimistic about the future of Chinese dance outside of China, and especially in Canada now, with increased awareness and acknowledgement of all cultural dance forms. I think it's really, we've been working so hard, in the background for so many decades, and I feel like we're heading into a very great time in terms of opportunities for visibility and inclusion in the dance sphere.
Yeah, I know some people who are not from India, or who are and are not necessarily even of mixed race, who are learning classical Indian dance, recreationally, but very seriously, as you say.
Yes.
Is it the same with Chinese dance, or is it a little bit less, not open to that, but is the rigor of it important, that it's, connected culturally to the person taking it, do you think?
We definitely have non-Chinese students who are interested in studying. With the syllabus, we've had maybe, a handful of half Chinese students, but it's how to answer. That's a tough question. I'm thinking to myself, I think a lot of the time it does have to do with the language, because in the lower levels of the syllabus, there's a lot of there are a lot of songs, and the children learn to sing and dance at the same time. So I think a lot of time non-Chinese speaking, even some ethnically Chinese students who don't speak Chinese feel intimidated by it a little. Yeah. So it's not, I mean, I would love to have a lot more non-Chinese students part of the program, but we haven't gone to that yet.
No, and I think it takes a very particular interested student, and that, but it's possible. But I'm partly mentioning it because I think when you said the serious recreation, I think that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a tradition and a history and the context of where the work comes from and the sense of academy, that all of these components are together.
That's right. But one of the things that I notice is a lot of students and a lot of parents here want their, usually daughters, I mean, we have some sons, but usually daughters, they would like them to enroll in Chinese dance as a way of maintaining a connection to their culture. So I think that's probably, why most of our students are Chinese, because they feel that it anchors them. Absolutely. Versus taking ballet. I mean, a lot of times they're thinking, well, we're in a Western society. Yes, it would, make sense to take ballet and jazz and tap, but I would like her or him to stay connected to the culture, and they don't get that in school. And so this is a way for them to do both, have a cultural and a dance.
Absolutely. And arguably, there is that same draw to ballet and tap and all of these different types of dance and the kind of array of different dance styles that have the same thing. They're about community, but they're also about roots, or they're about understanding culture, context, art making, the arts inside all of these other pressures to learn, other things and across the board. So we could talk more about the company and everything as well, and that's very exciting, and we'll get onto that. But I love what you've said about the merger. Maybe that's not quite the right word, but how you feel like Chinese dance has, or maybe I'm paraphrasing wrongly, over interpreting what you've said. You see correlations between Chinese dance and modern dance and postmodern dance in terms of lines, in terms of phrasing, maybe in terms of grace to a certain degree, or presentation a little bit. Mm-hmm. When did you realize that? Was it during your studies at SFU? Was it later than that? And you've written a wonderful article, which is on your website, about the correlations that you've seen. And I'd love for you to just riff on that a little bit in terms of, just because I agree, there's a resonance for me with that too, in terms of, I remember once I created a full-length work, and I remember somebody mentioning that the moves in one of the sections seemed very Chinese dance-like. Somebody said wrists, using the wrists, like there was arm actions, hand actions, and finishing positions that seemed to be referencing that. They weren't for me. I haven't learned that, but there was an atmosphere, a sense, an essence I was going for that had a delicacy that didn't end that wasn't just imagined. I wanted the audience and the dancers to experience it. And for me, that meant it had to continue in the wrist, through the fingers, and leave and hold it like a conductor would, so those for an orchestra. So I was thinking of, when I was reading your article, I was thinking of that. And I was thinking then of diagonal lines in space that hold but the energy with which you do that. So it's not hitting things. Yeah. But you obviously have to hit things in Chinese dance to be able to, control them, right? So, of course. Could you talk a little bit about how you see the correlations or the influence, maybe?
Yes. I think going back to when I realized it, like inside my body, was when I was at SFU, and more particularly in Graham class, because of course, the wonderful Judith Carey was my teacher at SFU. And that was my first exposure to Graham. And during Graham class, when we were doing contractions and release, I thought, this feels familiar already. And then because it was, a parallel training time, because I would do my lessons here, and then after that, I stopped for a year. I went back to China. I studied some more. I came back, finished my degree, and I went back to China again. So it was kind of a sandwiching time for me between the two worlds, and I really felt it come together in the core. And I think because specifically in classical Chinese dance training, we talk so much about the dantian, the center of your body, and that's basically the same place where all the contraction and release comes from in Graham. And so that kind of started, that's when the connection for me started. And then, of course, just the difference in the expressiveness of the upper body, in contemporary dance versus, say, ballet.
Yeah. And
how that there's a sense of freedom in the upper body. And I think because Chinese dance, classical Chinese dance also places so much emphasis on technique. I mean, the classical Chinese dance is technique classes based on the Russian ballet system. We have a full bar and center and allegro and all of that within our vocabulary. And so it really, I can see a lot of correlation. I mean, if you look at the dancers in China who are trained in classical Chinese, I mean, look at Cheng Xin, right? He was trained in classical Chinese dance all his life, and he came and was able to perform with Ballet BC for 7 seasons, but also, have a very successful career in the contemporary dance world. And I think it's just, a body is a body, and the knowledge in the body is transferable regardless of dance genre. But I think, as you said, there's a flow, because we emphasize so much the use of breath and how the breath it propels all of the movement. It really does lend itself to contemporary dance a lot.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a really lovely kind of summation of, your realization, and then the kind of like specifics along the way, particulars where we could find so many more, of course. So you have also talked about how many, like the historical context of classical Chinese dance. And I just thought it might be nice to hear about, I think you've used the term folk and minority dances within Chinese history. So could you talk about that a bit?
So Chinese dance, I mean, it's a very, very broad dance form. It has over 4,000 years of history. And, I could talk for hours about it if we really wanted to get into it.
Okay, let's go.
It's not easy to summarize in, in one short conversation. But basically, Chinese dance can be categorized into 3 main categories. So we have classical dance, we have folk dance, and we have the ethnic dances. So classical dance really is, you could say it's a type of a hybrid dance form. So why do I say that? It's because classical dance really has its influences from many aspects of Chinese culture, including the imperial court dances. So, I mean, we can trace back many, many dynasties. There's tradition of dance in the court, in the imperial court. It also comes from classical opera, so Chinese opera. It has influences from martial arts, namely wushu and tai chi. It also draws from a lot of historical artifacts. So, for example, pottery, sculpture, things that were unearthed from previous dynasties, paintings, there are fresco murals that depict dance. So it's all from that. And also, what is important to understand when we're talking about classical Chinese dance is that, it has a very, very long history, but really it was codified in the 1950s at Beijing Dance Academy. So it is old and new at the same time, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
So when Beijing Dance Academy was formed in 1954, all the best artists, from around China were brought to Beijing, and together they wanted to build a legacy for classical Chinese dance in terms of finding a way to train dancers and to establish, what is classical Chinese dance, and to give it basically a very clear form. And at that time, there was a lot of It's funny because now when I try to speak about Chinese dance, half of my brain goes into Chinese. So I find
Oh yeah.
I'm trying in my brain. I'm trying to the language.
You've got to translate at the same time in your own brain.
Inside my head. This is why I feel like I'm like, come on, let's get the words out. Like,
and then it's hard to say both when you're in this scenario to go to one to the other. You're not, you're not here to.
Like, I mean, because English is my first language, and but I've used Chinese so much in the past, a few decades that, especially when it comes to speaking about Chinese dance, my brain will automatically flip into Chinese. So sorry,
I'd love to hear it if you want to say it. Not that I would understand, but I would love to hear it.
So where was I? At that time, there was a lot of exchange with the Russian ballet, the Soviet ballet masters.
Yeah.
And so they recognized that, classical ballet with its, hundreds of years of history as well, was a fantastic way to train dancers technically. Yeah. And so we borrowed a lot of the methods of Russian ballet. And we borrowed the bar. I mean, we of course added our own upper body movements. The arms are different, but our bar in classical Chinese dance is based on plie, tendu, dégagé, all of that. Yeah. And so classical Chinese dance today that you see was really a hybrid form that was codified in the 1950s at the Beijing Dance Academy, and of course, classical Chinese dance has many, many sub-styles, but really at the core of it, we have the technique training. We have what we call shen yun, which is body rhythms, and that's working exclusively on how to use the breath to move. So we see in shen yun, we see the influences of, say, tai chi. In Chinese, we don't call it tai chi, we call it tai chi. Yeah. But nice. The use of the breath. Mm-hmm. We also, there's a lot of acrobatics that come into classical Chinese dance, and that is from the martial arts and the Chinese opera. Mm-hmm. So classical Chinese dance, you could study your whole lifetime and not finish learning. Yes. Yeah. And then the other styles of Chinese dance, we have folk and ethnic. So in China, there are 56 different ethnic groups. The largest group is the Han. So majority of Chinese people that you meet are of Han descent. So I'm Han. And so outside of Han, then we would have other ethnic groups, like including, the Mongolian, the Dai minority. There's a lot of different ethnic groups. And so each of these groups have a dance tradition. Yeah. So when we say folk dance, we're really talking about the folk dance of the Han ethnic group. And because they're dispersed all throughout China, folk dance really varies from region to region. But when we think about Chinese dance, so when in the West people think Chinese dance, it's the folk dances that come to mind. So it's the lion dance that we see, Chinese New Year. It's the fan dances, the ribbon dances, the umbrella dances, the scarf dances. Those are all Han folk dances.
And so where do all the fan, the symbols, are the symbols from opera too? Or are the symbols partially? Or are they, it's so phenomenal how they're kind of like storytelling, but they seem to have a connection to, as you say, the dynasties and everything as well. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Yes. So going back to the imperial court in China, at that time there were dancers, part of the imperial court, and a lot of them, when the dynasties fell and they went back to their hometowns, they continued their dance tradition, and dance is just part of daily life. I mean, we dance during happy occasions, Chinese New Year, harvest, weddings, birthdays, and so it also comes from daily life. Yeah. So a lot of the movements that you see in folk dance are related to regional customs, planting the harvest, sowing the harvest, that type of thing. Sometimes it's hard to say exactly what the symbols come from because it's just such a long history. But the fan dance, they're performed in all different regions of China. I mean, in terms of the movements, the dynamics, the style, they differ. But of course, fan dance, we have many different types of fan in Chinese dance. So again, a folk dance is just another category where you could spend your lifetime learning. Yes. And then of course the non-Han dances we classify as the ethnic dances, and those also have a very rich tradition and come along. A lot of times they're influenced by geography, by their customs, by their religion. It's very, very diverse.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. It's wonderful. And of course, it's not your job to and just your responsibility to tell us the whole history of Chinese dance in 5 minutes. But I do appreciate you, kind of giving us that insight.
So Chinese dance is a very broad dance form. I tell my students, sometimes it's challenging to be a Chinese dancer because when we train at the bar, you need to have your posture, your alignment a certain way. But if we come to the center and we're doing, different dance styles, and all of a sudden it's the complete opposite. Like you can't straighten your legs, you have to soften them. And it's just, so it's like many, many dance styles under one umbrella.
Absolutely. And I think that's what you were saying about Chen Chen with his, ability and his diversity, his versatility.
Yes.
But there's also a kind of, you're protecting your body with the bar work and with all of those things. There's a level of maintenance, which is an awareness that gives you, across the forms, that it gives you an awareness of how you move, of what it means to straighten, what it means to, soften, these kinds of things. And they all become tools that are honed, in terms of, so I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. It's not like you let go of the bar and you do the same thing. When you get into the sense of that, I think that's, So I wonder if you could talk a little bit just about, which direction?
There's so many things.
I know there's so many ways we could go. Would you like to talk a little bit about the company?
Yes. So the way our academy is structured, we have the syllabus, which covers 13 levels, and the students who are in the higher levels and beyond, they're serious recreational students. They are part of the company. So we're not able to, have a full-time company where they're employed as dancers. And unfortunately in Canada right now, it's very difficult to dance professionally as a Chinese dancer. I mean, it's difficult to dance professionally, period. That's, unfortunately that's the reality of being a dance artist in Canada. But the Lorita Leung Dance Company, so they're all dancers, students who have danced over a decade, and have currently, the dancers who are in company have all finished their syllabus and they're out of university, many of them. So they really have been dancing their whole life, 20 plus years, and in a very serious training, mind, space, body.
Absolutely. Dedicated. Yes, absolutely.
And so we also, nurture the younger students who are serious about their Chinese dance studies as well. So in addition to company, we also have the younger group that we call the Little Panda group. And I think it's wonderful to see the more accomplished dancers, the adult dancers, but also to see the up and coming, and to see the amount of dedication that they have at, a younger age. I think it's important to celebrate dancers at all ages. And in the professional dance world, we're always assuming that, okay, they're adults and they're, trying to do this as a vocation. But I think, especially in cultural dance studies, it's important to also highlight the younger dancers.
I can't help but think about you at 14 going to Beijing on your own, to have that experience, and how you're able to offer that to people, to young dancers here at home, so they don't have to get on a plane and go all that way, but they are still, but they are experiencing a level, an intensity level, an intimacy level, and a connection to audience, or a connection to expressing it to other people, which is just a beautiful thing. I think that's wonderful. You have performances every year I notice with the company.
Yes.
Will you be doing one in 2025? Did you do, is it a school-wide performance that you do? And do you do that in Richmond usually?
So we usually have our year-end. I hate calling it a recital.
I know, isn't it? It's a horrible
word. That's probably
now.
one of my least favorite words. It's the recital.
Yeah. I agree.
It's the year-end celebration. Yeah.
Yes.
It's the extravaganza, whatever we would like to call it other than recital. But we do have a year-end performance. It's every year at the end of May. And we have, for the past 2 decades, been having it at Michael J. Fox Theatre in Burnaby. And every other year we have a gala performance which features the company and the Panda Group. Was it 2023? We had it at the Playhouse.
Yeah.
But that, as you know, obviously, it's a lot of work. And so in 2022 and 2023, we had 2 big shows a year. And that was just, that was a lot.
It's too much. Well, it starts to affect the teaching, right? It starts to affect the other aspects, which I think is something that's really important to understand, that it's you forfeit something else, a level somewhere else to be able to fit those things in. And I love that it's not totally solely about production. It's not about, you're not a producing company, that is tied to that and so, you're offering lots of opportunities, not just one kind of opportunities to your students and to audiences.
Yeah, it's all about balance. It really is. And of course the challenges of running a dance studio, and you only see them once or twice a week. So you really have to maximize the studio time that you have.
And I wanted to say about the company structure in this context, I think what's so wonderful about it is there's always that fallout when you reach the end of a syllabus, or you reach the end, or you finish a degree, or you do something where your whole network on cohort seems to dissipate, fall apart, or and suddenly the structure that has kept you engaged and connected to something falls out from under you. And I think the company provides access still and a motivation to continue to feel that connection and work on the connection and continue to, it offers structure, but it also makes the individual strive for something that's connected to the dance. And I think more opportunities like that are really called for, I think, to support those people who want to, but aren't necessarily able to continue at a level that they think would make them worthy of turning up to auditions or turning up to be included or to present their own work. I think I've always been absolutely committed and obsessed to that space of mentorship, if you like, or facilitation of people's own practice.
Yes.
So I think that's what you're offering with the company as well. So I think that's wonderful.
It's a safe space, and many of them are doing their own choreography and exploring their own voice within the Chinese dance and contemporized Chinese dance context. So it's very now, because the studio, the Dance Academy has been in existence for over 50 years. We really have seen generations of students come through, and we're at the point now where we have, former alumni's children who are coming, and students that I haven't seen for 10, 15 years. They're back at the studio because their daughter is in class now. And it really does feel like such a warm community and a big family. It sounds kind of cliche because we all say, oh yeah, we're a big family, but we truly are, because a lot of the students grow up, from the time they're 5 until they're finished university, and then they go into the workforce, and then now their children are here, and they're
absolutely.
And I love having them because they know exactly what's going on. We can.
They know exactly what's going on, and they brought their children to it,
and
which
they
is
can
a really
help,
good sign.
Get all the other parents in shape, and it's wonderful. It really is. Yeah,
that's so supportive, and just it's really positive. It's a really positive. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for the conversation. I know there's so many more things we could discuss.
Yes.
And of course, ChineseDance.ca, is your website.
That's
and
right.
We'll post that. Yeah, so there'll be more updates on there, obviously, on a yearly basis as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and your article is on there if people are interested in reading that. That's really wonderful. So it's easy access to that. Jessica, it's been far too long, but this has been a lovely way of catching up.
Such a pleasure chatting with Claire.
Yeah, lovely to chat with you too. And lots of love to Chen Chen as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. And
yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. We would love for you to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, as this will help other listeners find us and help us to grow our dance audience. We'll be back next month. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook at The Dance Centre, Twitter at Dance Centre, and Instagram at The Dance Centre BC. And if you'd like to support our work, please consider making a donation. Just go to our website at thedancecentre.ca, where you'll find extensive information about our upcoming programs and events. The music for the Dance Centre podcast was composed by James B. Maxwell. Always a pleasure to connect with you through dance. Until next time.